Hey everyone, welcome to another Game of Thrones Tower of Babble breakdown. This is for Season 2, Episode 2, The Nightlands, and this is a rewatch episode. So spoilers right up front, we'll be spoiling everything through Season 1 through Season... Basically, the beginning of Season 8, so the end of Season 7, with reflecting on Season 2. All right, so this is the Season 2 rewatch for The Nightlands, which we discussed before the show is a weird title. This episode, it's like one half line of dialogue in a very small scene. So before we get into that, though, let me just quickly mention that we have a social media presence, and we would appreciate your following us there. So at Tower Babblecast on Twitter, facebook.com/TowerBabblecast, and head over to our website, towerofbabble.ca, to find everything that we do, including our regular show, which is the Tower of Babble podcast, where we talk about general nerdy stuff, not just Game of Thrones. Okay. On top of that, last week, if you listened, you know that we launched a Patreon. So I do need to give that a plug now. Head over to patreon.com/TowerBabblecast. BABBLE is the way that's spelled. And you can see the different tiers that we have available. I do have a couple exciting announcements related to that. We didn't have as many last week. It was just kind of, here's the idea, here's what's happening. We got one subscriber. Big shout out to
Brian.
Thank you. Big shout out to Brian for being the first ever Patreon subscriber.
That's huge.
It is huge.
It's
There one day will be a plaque dedicated. You know, like when you go down to a park and then there's like, you know, you sit on a bench and like the bench says proudly dedicated by blank thing. Usually rich people. In this case, it's unclear whether he's rich or not. But one day there will be a plaque on one of our chairs in our future studio that will say proudly dedicated by Brian.
Yeah.
And that you can't discount that. So we want you to be one of those other people who might get a plaque on a chair one day. So get over to, again, towerbabblepodcast.com, towerbabble.ca /donate. And you can not only find a link to our Patreon page, but also one-time donation buttons that if you don't want to subscribe, you can make a one-time donation there. Okay. The reason you might be enticed to do that is because we're actually doing everyone who subscribes between now and the end of February will be entered for a prize that is going to include a Tower Babble t-shirt, which we haven't created yet, but will be created by that point. ToB t-shirt. We've been talking about wanting one for ourselves for many years, so this is a really good excuse to do that.
Trying to get into merch for, like, we have our own mugs. We each have our own Tower Babble mug.
And
not for sale.
Yeah, one person asked us one time if they were for sale. If they're not for sale, we all have our own mug, and then also there's one out in the wild somewhere.
Yeah,
in Southern California,
right.
I think. And a bunch of stickers, because we have so many stickers.
Like, I know you're hearing a bunch. This is going to be too many stickers.
Like you'd be like, oh, that's nice. I like some stickers. Be like, you can have just too many of them.
You're going to run out of things to stick them on.
If you put one on everything you own, you would still have some left over. As well as, and I think the more exciting part is, Dan, how you better at describing this than I am.
Yeah, I wanted to put together sort of a Game of Thrones resource package, so to speak. So when I read the books, I have my World of Ice and Fire ready. I have the Lands of Ice and Fire in case I need to reference any of the maps. And the World of Ice and Fire is sort of like a in-world encyclopedia sort of thing. You can use it to go back and, like, for a little bit of extra context about, you know, the Lords of the Riverlands, where they came from, blah, blah, blah. It's just, like I said, resources that help you, provide context.
I was going to say context. That's good.
That's a good buzzword.
Yeah.
Context.
Context is for kings.
So those two, as well as the newly released Fire and Blood, which is, again, it's a Targaryen lineage. It's also written in world, but it still provides a lot of historical Game of Thrones knowledge.
Right. So you can subscribe for as low as $5 and get entered to win that package. So anyone by the end of February 28th, midnight Central Time. Okay. So with that out of the way, because we spent way too long last time talking about that, let's just jump right into the episode. We're fully aware that a 2-hour episode is way too long. You don't have to, email it to us and say, Julian, we understand. You guys like to talk about it, but we got places to be. We can't be listening to 2-hour long episodes every week. We get it. So we're going to try to keep it a little bit shorter. And by that, I just mean we're going to try to keep it a little bit shorter.
Just more focused. No tangents this time.
That's seemingly impossible. But here we go. This episode, season 2, episode 2, The Nightlands, is directed by Alan Taylor, who you might recognize from such works as Thor: The Dark World.
Or last week's episode.
Didn't we just talk about how he was attached to direct something else on last week's Full Up, like Tower Babble podcast?
I don't remember.
You don't remember
I don't think so. No.
I'm almost positive. Anyways, Alan Taylor, and then written by Weiss and Benioff as well. So same team as last week. Okay. So we get the opening credits scene. The only thing that's different this time is Pike is the first time we see Pike this time, which has always been one of my favorite of the little animations with the little towers that pop up and the bridges that kind of like flop around when they do that. Yeah. I think it's a nice little touch. That's it. That's the only thing that's new, I think, in the
opener. Yeah.
Yeah. We start at Arya. She's on the road. Basically, every scene with Arya in this episode is really nice scenery, very green and lush with like crystal clear rivers, and it's amazing. Actually, the camera work and the setting that they did, the scouting, really good stuff. This is our first introduction to Jack and Hagar. He's locked in that cage with those crazy people. He's very courteous, but like very polite, talking in that third person kind of.
It's weird that
first person.
Yeah, I don't like it.
We all talk in third person, right? We speak in third person.
No, we speak in first person. He's talking third person. He's using his own name as a proper. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, you're right. And then but she's not into it. And then there's some pretty lewd remarks made by the rest of
by Rorge. Yeah, that guy's a monster. He's the worst.
He's something about a broomstick or like I don't know. It's pretty gross.
So those three were in the black cells when Ned Stark lost his head. So he had given Yoren permission to go and into the prison at King's Landing and take whatever he thought the Night's Watch could use.
Right.
So those three are essentially like the worst of the worst. They were in the lowest.
Right, and they'll be somehow initiated into the Night's Watch, so they can presumably commit other types of crimes just while under the guise of the Night's Watch.
No, the Night's Watch would, in theory, teach them some discipline and use them, a tool for every purpose.
Seems like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, but I don't know. They're obviously accomplished fighters, so that's something that the Watch is always.
Why is that obvious?
It's obvious, all right.
Okay.
I decided it's obvious. It's obvious to me because I know later on they are.
Okay. But they're insane people. Murderers.
Their names are Rorge and Biter.
Biter?
That guy.
The crazy one.
You don't really see a lot of him in the show, but he's supposed to be this big, bald, and he's filed his teeth into fangs, and he doesn't speak to anybody ever. He just like hisses and growls and bites people.
them.
Yeah.
And eats them.
And they named him Biter. Yeah.
Okay. And then the Gold Cloaks arrive. Everyone remarks how far away from home that they are. They don't really normally leave King's Landing very often, I imagine.
Yeah.
And Arya thinks that they're out for her, so she hides, right? And so Yoren approaches them, kind of like, "What are you guys here for?" Turns out they're there for Gendry, but before we find that out, there's a fucking. It's probably one of the coolest scenes in like just the line, like just what he does, where he just puts the knife right up to his groin, basically. And the stuff he says is like, everyone's always worried about their neck. They're not worried about what's down below. And then like, I could nick you right here, and you could, and there's no one around who knows how to unnick you, which is such a funny line.
They give Yoren some pretty good lines.
He's so cool. And then he talks about how he just sharpened his blade, and he could quote, "I could shave a spider's ass if I wanted to," which is ridiculous, but is so cool. And so he tells him to basically to fuck off. So my question here for you is this: would Yoren have acted so like brazen if he didn't suspect that they were there for Arya?
That's hard to say. I mean, technically,
just throwing the hard questions at you right away. Yeah.
Technically, he should react that way no matter what, because they're outside the laws of the King's Landing at that point, right? They all belong to the Watch.
But probably he wouldn't care that much, right? To antagonize someone. Like
it's really hard to say. Like that's something that probably would never have happened to Yoren before, because before this they would have just respected the fact that they were Night's Watch and left them alone, right? he's never had to deal with this kind of thing before, and he's been doing that circuit all the way from the Wall to the south and back.
By the
for
way,
20 years.
clearly the best job if you're in the Night's Watch.
Well, yeah,
it's not even close. Like there's no better job as a Night's Watchman than the guy who gets to go down south all the time.
I mean,
no oversight, by the way. You can just do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And take as long as you want and show up with, as long as you show up with people, you're cool.
You did
you're
your
good.
job.
Right. Because like, let's be honest. You think Yoren was really respecting that whole vow of celibacy thing?
Oh, no.
Absolutely not. There's no way. There's no fucking way.
Yeah, you're right. It's a pretty cushion. Like you're not in the cold all the time. He's got an expense account, right?
Yeah. you got to know he's got an
They give him a
account.
per diem, right?
But they depend on him to bring in the goods. He's like the salesperson of the Night's Watch. Anyway, so long and short of it, you think probably not.
I think I would hope that he would, but realistically, maybe not.
Yeah, I don't think he would have put up as much of a fight.
Yeah.
Okay, so any other things you want to say about that scene before we move on?
No, it's just I miss Yoren, knowing
yeah.
what happens later on. He's a pretty cool character.
And then we cut to King's Landing.
Well, I guess no, isn't that the scene where Gendry finds out that Arya's, or he lets Arya know
Yes,
that?
I mean technically yes, that's also the same scene. Presumably he already knew.
He deduces that
Right.
she's a girl.
Yeah. It's pretty funny. Like it's clever dialogue. There's a moment where like where he says like you shouldn't antagonize people who are bigger than you, or basically you shouldn't. And then she's like, well, then I wouldn't get to do it to anyone, which is really good. Arya at this point is it's hard to describe. She's much more innocent at this point, but she's also killed a person already. So her attitude just kind of is much more. It's less. I don't know how the best way to put it, because she's so harsh later on.
Yeah, well, she
right?
grows, she becomes callous, and
Yeah.
at this point, yes, she has killed the stable boy, but she's ashamed of that. She's actually terrified to tell anybody about
Right.
that.
And well,
right?
she doesn't like being called a lady, right? Because he teases her about that.
Yeah,
and he's
well,
like,
she's
I
never
should
like
call
that.
you milady or whatever.
Right.
And and Gendry's right. It's like, well, you grew up in a castle, and like all this stuff. It's like, yeah, you're right. But she's still Arya in the sense like that she's still she's never been about that, but she's also not quite as like, she's not going to just murder someone at the drop of a hat yet. It's kind of a nice balance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So then we're moving on. So Tyrion is whistling something. I think it's the Rains of Castamere.
It's the Rains of Castamere, yeah.
He's
He did it in the last episode as well when he was walking in.
He's whistling Rains of Castamere, which really doesn't get its like people. It's been always around through season 1 and season 2, but it doesn't really get its due until the end of season 3 when like it's like the theme of like the shittiest moment.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, how cool is that for the show to introduce it and like not even tell the story of the Rains of Castamere until much later in the series?
I know.
Right. So that they've established this song, and you'll like the themes, it'll evoke Lannister.
The world building is unreal.
Yeah,
in
it's
that kind of
nuts.
stuff. It's just so cool. I love that. So anyway, he's whistling. He comes into his chambers, and Shay and Varys are having a nice chat. She's like, and you were late, but your friend Varys was nice enough to keep me company. And there's a lot of vocal sparring.
A lot of subtext.
So much subtext. It's just dripping.
Yeah.
It's so good. My favorite one is when he says you should try her fish pie.
That one's a bit much.
No, it's just so funny because he's like, I don't know if I like fish pie. And she's like, I can tell. He's like, how would you know? I can just tell.
I didn't need that.
You didn't like that one?
I
just think it was funny because of how Varys reacts to it, and then also how Shay's like she isn't up with all the subtext that's going on, but that one she is.
She
right?
understands the innuendo, but they are speaking a different language. There's another level that Tyrion and Varys are on.
Do you think that's insulting for her? Like, does she feel
No,
like,
because that's the whole point, is that it's designed so that she wouldn't even know.
Yeah, except imagine if people were talking like that around you. You would know. You would know.
I don't know. Maybe they're doing it all the time and you don't notice. How would you know?
Yeah, I don't think so. It's because like the way it's said, it's like the passive aggressive nature of the whole thing is just it like drips off of it. If I can keep using dripping as a adjective, yeah. Also an adverb. No, just an adjective. Just a verb.
Dripping is a verb.
Just
man.
a verb.
It's an action. It's a verb. It is dripping. You could be an
I
adjective.
think it could be an
yeah.
adverb.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's an adverb. So not, yeah. Okay. So I'm not wrong. Okay.
Actually, yeah. Let's move on. You were using it as an adjective.
Yeah, I know, but that doesn't mean still. You know what I mean, and it doesn't matter. Tyrion, it basically calls Varys on his shit. You know, it's easy to forget that we went a good length of time when these two didn't get to interact, and this might be one of the best duos on the show. Like just generally, just in terms of dialogue and interaction and acting and how it all meshes together to create like a cohesive whole. Whenever the two of them are on screen and having a dialogue, it's always entertaining and interesting. So this is like one of the few times when it's just the two of them. I mean, there is a third person here, but it's really just the two of them talking.
Right.
And we get a lot of that over the next, season and a half or so. But we go a long stretch of time where that's not the case. And when they get back together, I remember thinking how great it was for them to get back together and be able to have those conversations again in a much less without the subtext, like just more, full text, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Overt text.
Over just the words that you're reading, right, is what they meant a lot of the time.
No, it's cool. Like this is so obviously they are aware of each other. I don't know how intelligent Varys thinks Tyrion is. He's learning that this whole for the next, like you said, season and a half, they're kind of getting to know that. So this is the first time they interact, and so
outside of small council,
basically. Tyrion sort of underestimates Varys a little bit. He just says basically, I speak the same language that you do. I don't take kindly to these threats.
Yeah,
don't stay out of my way. And then Varys has his own threat back, essentially. Like, listen, you might think that you speak this language, but you're new here, and
I'm good at keeping secrets, he says, which is very funny. Basically, hey, it's cool that you brought this cool chick here. She seems interesting. She seems nice.
Mm-hmm.
Be a shame if anyone knew.
Be a shame if your father would.
Exactly. Yeah, just saying. And that's the threat he makes, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Love it.
Okay, then we go to a small council meeting. Cersei tears up the terms / demands that the Starks made that we saw them make last week. His cousin, whatever his name is there. And Tyrion makes a jab about how she's become really good at tearing up pieces of paper, which is, like, again, hilarious, and suggests that they return the bones of Ned Stark as a show of good faith. I guess it's not clear, but that's what's agreed on, that they won't do anything else, but they will return the bones. That's basically the consensus.
Yeah, that's Tyrion. That's the one thing that he's willing to concede, right? As like an honorable gesture.
Right.
It's like, hey,
even Cersei probably wouldn't have done that, but
Cersei never would have, and Joffrey would never have either. Yeah. But Tyrion makes it happen.
Right. So what are they like? Where are the remains now? Are they just being stored in how's that work?
Yeah.
Like, how do they know that they're getting the bones of
after someone dies? It goes like, technically the Silent Sisters should be taking them back. Like when Ned died, the Silent Sisters should have been taking him back to Winterfell right then and there.
Right.
But that wasn't arranged. They had his head on a spike. Tyrion had the head removed, would have paired the head with the body. They would have, I don't know, they filed it away under Stark.
You can imagine there'd be some clerical errors that you could, like, you get the head, but you don't get the right body.
I mean, bones are bones, right?
Right. And then a raven from Castle Black arrives. This one's from Lord Commander Mormont. A lot of dismissive talk about the wildlings and their, king beyond the wall. Cersei makes a joke about how, what was there, like 8 of them now, kings, which is a joke we basically made last week, and it's true. I mean, that's a good point. I mean, at this point in the series, there's just too many quote unquote kings.
There's 4 right now, soon to be 5, and it's the War of the 5 Kings, right?
Right, and a 6th one up in there.
Yeah, he doesn't count.
Yeah, that's what she's getting at. The line, "the cold wind rises and the dead rise with them," is probably one of the coolest lines in this entire show. Generally, read by Tyrion, but written by Lord Commander Mormont.
Yeah.
Basically, long and short of it is they're asking for more men.
The thing is, they're always asking for more men, so they're likely to be dismissed. Like that one line isn't going to change anything for Cersei and the court.
Tyrion's willing to believe it, though. It seems like he is anyway. He's like, oh well. He's like, Commander Mormont doesn't lie. He's what he says. He's like, he doesn't lie. If he's telling me that there's people who come back from the dead, he's like, he is willing to at least listen to his argument.
Right. And like, so he when he went up to the wall, gained a lot of respect for Mormont, not Alistair Thorne, who I don't think at this point in the show hasn't been sent to King's Landing yet, but is eventually sent with the hand, right?
Right.
No, he might have been sent already. Yeah, he had to have been because he didn't go on the raging with them. Yeah. So he would have been sent to King's Landing. He might not be there yet. I don't know. He's on the ship, right? But so when Alistair Thorne arrives, Tyrion completely dismisses him because he didn't like the guy. But that's the one who had
his own personal biases.
Yeah. But so he mentions in this episode, just essentially, the Night's Watch is the only thing that stands between us and whatever's out there. But when he was up there on the wall, he like standing with Jon, he does remember feeling some sort of supernatural, like holy shit, this is the end of the world. That primal fear.
Is it one of those things where like you stand at the top of a mountain and you feel like you're on top of the world? Like, you know what I mean?
But for them, it is the end of their world. Essentially, it's essentially a fear of the unknown, right? That everything on that other side of that wall, every fairy tale that you have ever heard could exist.
Grumpkins and Snarks.
Yeah, those are the ones that are most often referenced.
Which is just a veiled reference to Winnie the Pooh, essentially.
You think they're heffalumps and woozles?
Yeah, absolutely. That's clearly what they're making. Like,
I don't know.
Based off of.
I mean, that's fine. I don't know if they are, but
I mean, okay, they might not be based off that, but it's the same concept, right?
I think it's more like a Grumpkin is their version of a goblin. A Snark is whatever else.
No, because they're playing it off as a joke, and heffalumps and woozles are also played off as like those don't exist, and like, but they do. You know what I mean?
Okay,
like,
so do you think it's maybe more likely that heffalumps and woozles are based on some other real world stuff?
Yeah,
or do you think it's more likely?
No, Dan. No, I don't think that. And I think I'll ask you to quietly and kindly shut the fuck up. Anyway, Tyrion points out, like you said, that they're the only thing standing between the civilized world and what lies beyond the wall. And that's it. There's nothing is done. It's just filed away and gone. All right, so we cut to then, obviously, beyond the wall to Craster's Keep. There, Jon is having a chat. They're just having a general conversation and about dignity. And one of them says, "If the gods wanted us to have dignity, they wouldn't have make us fart when we died," which is very funny.
Another character who gets some of the best lines. That's Dolorous Ed.
Yeah, it's so good.
Hilarious.
He talks about his like grandmother or something, or his aunt, and that is comic gold. And then Sam makes a comment, and he's like, "Excuse me, we're having a serious conversation here," which is fun. Sam comments basically, he's like, he's looking around at the women, and he's like,
Dolorous Ed, by the way, based on Eeyore and no other reference.
yeah, obviously. Yeah. Screw you. The guy is talking. Okay, so again, let me say, Sam is commenting on how, hey, if there's so many wives, what happens to the boys, right? First one to kind of think about that. No one's really brought it up until that point. And they're also talking about the first time they've ever having sex and stuff like that. And Sam just kind of shows off his innocence. It's very, very cute. Sam then saves, quote unquote. I'm just saying that in quotes because Ghost is doing nothing. He's just standing there. He's just standing there. I get it. Giant wolf.
Yeah, it's a monster.
Totally understand that. But like, if you look at like the face of Ghost at the time, he's just like smiling with his tongue out, right? Just minding his own business. She might have had something that was like a treat or something. I've seen dogs do that exact look when they know you have a fucking dog treat in your hand. You haven't showed it to them. They just fucking know it, and they'll stand super close to you. Yeah. Like there's the dogs that come visit us at this one cocktail bar that I work at. We have a little thing of dog snacks in the window. So some will come up to the window and jump up to the window because they see the dog snacks there, and they'll like stare at it. And then others will come up to the door and like wait for me to come out with the dog snacks.
Smart ones.
Yeah. And they won't let me even like open the, like they won't let me get out the door before they're already like on top of me asking for snacks. Like, listen, I'm here to give you the snack. Can you give me something? Give me some space, shake a paw. Like, let's do something interesting here right? Earn the snacks, right? So all I'm saying is Ghost did nothing wrong.
No, of course not. He's just sniffing around.
He's just sniffing around.
Also, giant. I think this is the first time we see one of the dinos.
I think it's
that
also the
big.
biggest version of Ghost we see. I think he gets smaller.
I know, that's what I thought.
You know what I mean? Because he's like up to her chest essentially in this shot. It's about the same size that Grey Wind is in the shot with Jaime.
Yeah.
But I think later on, and whenever we see Ghost with Jon, the Ghost is still more like regular wolf size, like maybe slightly larger than a standard wolf, but this is much larger than that. So that's I think that's an inconsistency.
It is
on
for
the
sure.
show.
And it's like, the CGI budget is what it is. So
yeah, but like it seems like they didn't need to, like they wouldn't have had to do that. Like they could have just been okay with the regular dog there, like just the one that it's based off of.
Yeah.
Right. Without having to make it bigger. But it's neither here nor there. Anyway, so Sam saves Gilly from the dog, from Ghost.
The wolf, please.
It is technically a dog, Dan. It's a lupus, if you will. And then shows Gilly to Jon, saying, "Hey, we need to save her." And Jon's like, "What the fuck? Like, give me a break here, man. You've been here 5 minutes and you already have like a groupie. Like, how is that even possible?" And apparently she's pregnant, and she's worried that if it's a boy, she makes an allusion to something will happen to it. And he's like, "Okay, if it's a boy, what will happen?" And she can't say. He's like, "Well, you're saying you want us to risk our lives to help you, but you won't even tell us why," which is literally the most legit argument on the ever made on this entire show, probably. And
that paired with the fact that they're just going further north, like it just doesn't make any sense.
We're not helping you, right?
Yeah.
So understandably, he's like, "Okay, bud, like chillax, put it away, right? She'll be fine, right?" And that's basically it. That's where that scene ends.
Yeah, it's just, like you said earlier, Sam is, even though he's older than Jon, he still is very innocent.
How much older?
I think he's like 2 years older than Jon,
Okay,
something like
not
that.
Not very much. Okay.
But yeah, he's never really had a friend like this before. Jon saved Sam when Sam came to the wall. He was the only one who stuck up for him, and
he'd for sure be dead.
Yeah, right. So Jon saved Sam, and now Sam, even though he's older, looks up to Jon as sort of a hero figure, right? Or a surrogate father figure, potentially more of a brother.
I think more of a brother, because his older brother, although his older brother was nice to him,
nice-ish, not when they were kids.
Maybe
he like the old no, Dickon is his younger brother, by the way.
Oh, I'm just thinking of the one that we meet when he visits his house.
Yeah, that's Dickon. He's the younger brother. That's
okay.
why Sam, like his dad, exiled him because
Dickon was more of a man.
He wanted Dickon to be his heir.
Right. Okay. Dickon. Oh, Dickon. So next thing, we're just gonna keep going here because we've probably already taken too long on the scenes we've already been on. So we go to the Red Wastes, which is probably the most important scene of this entire episode. It's the namesake, basically. Everyone is mostly dead and thirsty. That's your
note there?
That's my note. That's my note here. A horse arrives with the head of one of her riders.
Rakharo.
I was just going to read that. I have it written down.
Oh, well.
Rakharo, if you had allowed me to finish.
I thought normally you don't know the names. You always
say, I did the research this time. So
like normally you throw to me for the names.
So Rakharo, Jorah suspect. So the thing is though, Jorah comes over and he like sees the head in the bag and he like pulls it up only halfway and he's like, "Yeah, I already know who this is," and he puts it back, and you can tell by the curly hair.
So the thing is that the actor, I don't remember his name. I wish I should have done the research, but I didn't. This was a contractual thing. He had to leave the show. He had other work. Like that really? Character is not dead in the books.
Okay, well there you go.
And it's not like she's like, or he is like one of Dany's strong right hands. He's sort of the leader of her Dothraki.
So she kind of, I mean, at the same time, thematically for the show, it also kind of works. Like it's just like she has to kind of take ownership, and kind of stand on her own. I think a bit, which I think that works. I think I'm okay. I'm not okay with beheadings. I mean, let me make that clear. But in this case, I'm okay with the fact that unlike in other occasions where we've had people leave the show and then recast by other people,
Yeah.
this one is like, hey, we found like a pretty good way to make this work.
Yeah, no, it does make sense. Or just had people that are just stabbed at the beginning of the episode without any warning or significance.
And that person's dead now.
So I refresh my memory. Do you remember in last week's episode, did she send just him or
No, there was multiple
she sent
riders.
her 3 blood riders, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they all went in.
They each go in a different direction. So his took him to one of the other Dothraki.
Yeah, and was
armies.
then murdered. Like he said, Jorah said last week, they'll kill you and take your dragons. Although they just killed him in this case. Smart horse knows how to make it all the way back. Impressive. That might be something that horses know how to do already. I don't know.
think so.
I don't know. So don't at me about that one. I appreciate that. Jorah suspects that he was beheaded by one of the other Khals, which is clear. One of the women from the camp start to weep.
Eerie.
Not because
You did
he's
do the
dead.
research on that name, did you?
I didn't. No, I didn't. Not because he is dead, but because they, quote, butchered him like an animal, unquote, which means that he can't reach the afterlife.
Yeah.
So can you give me a background? Like, what is it? Like, how's that work? Like,
When a Dothraki dies, they're supposed to be burned with their horse. So you kill his horse as well. When a Khal dies, you kill his blood riders as well. So they all go to the Nightlands together.
that's rough.
Yeah, it's like, yeah. But they sign up for it. That's what, like, when you become a blood rider, you say your life is devoted to this Khal. So when the Khal dies, you die too. You go and protect. You ride with him into the Nightlands.
It's a blood rider, bro. Ride for life.
Blood in, blood out.
Ride for life.
So yeah, essentially that's what they didn't do for him is they just butchered his body. They gave the head back. And they cut his braid because obviously he lost.
Right.
So I think the idea is Dany is going to make a pyre, kill that horse probably, and burn the head. And hopefully that's good enough.
Close enough, I guess. Right. All right. That's a good answer. I'll allow it. And that's, by the way, this is the only time we see them this week. That's it. That's the one scene. And they still get the entire title of the episode.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of what else the Nightlands could be referencing. And like, I don't know. Like you said earlier,
they were at night and it was land when they at the end of the episode.
That's the dun 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 moment.
It could be it could just be in some type of reference to the White Walkers or something.
Or just afterlife in general. Let's keep going. And if I think of anything like that might also.
I don't know. I think you might be right on this one, but it just it doesn't feel great. Okay. We're now not quite at Pike, but close to Pike at this point. So he can see it. We're on a ship with Theon. And this scene, I think, again, I'm just going to mention this in conjunction with another scene. So this scene leads right into a scene at Littlefinger's brothel and King's Landing afterwards. Yeah. This is important for a couple reasons. We'll get there. So again, first shot of the Iron Islands, very gorgeous, beautiful shot of these fake castles that don't exist in real life. Theon looks wistfully at them and then goes down below to sleep with the captain's daughter. Again. So there's a couple shitty. Okay, so this is where Theon gets particularly crappy. Like it's hard to describe. He went from being a nothing character essentially to being one of the shittiest ones in like the drop of a hat. And obviously there's a lot going on that leads into that. One of the first things he says to her in the scene, the captain's daughter, is, "You should smile more with your lips closed," which is particularly shitty.
Look, he's always been like, he's a stereotypical douche at this point.
Yeah,
right?
He's the douchiest of the douches in this.
And he was like that in season 1 too. He's very cocky.
We barely get to see him in that. Like, we don't see him interact with anyone like this ever.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and this is him sort of essentially at the peak of his confidence. You know, he's the prodigal son returning. He's the prince.
He's entrusted with a key mission by the Northern Army.
Yeah.
Yada yada. Fuck the captain's wife, I guess.
Daughter.
You know what?
If the wife were there, he probably would have tried that too.
Probably, right?
Yeah, wouldn't put it past him.
I don't know which is worse, to be honest. So what? It's hard to tell. So anyway, this scene and the one following it is the literal definition of sexposition, because they are giving you some sort of color about the world, like giving you some information about what the Ironborn are like in this particular scene, right? Um, Talking about the nature of the Islands and how it's important Theon will arrive to a big celebration of his return. But we'll get to that later. But yeah, it's the most sex position scene in the entire show, probably.
Yeah, this is pretty close. Like, I still think the scene with Theon at least serves a purpose, and I think that's a good way to tell that part of the
that's
story.
what the whole point of sex. Do you think that's a good way of telling? You think that's a good way of telling that story?
Of him, yeah, he's
you think in combination with the next scene?
No, I'm talking about the scene with Theon
Okay.
and the captain's daughter. I'm not defending his actions. I don't know.
No. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying.
I'm saying it's a good way to explore and explain the culture of the Ironborn before we get to the island, because it's not going to be explained on the island. You're already in it.
I agree with you, but does it have to happen while he's?
Yeah, because he's talking to her about what the
yeah.
difference between a salt wife and a rock wife is, and the way that Ironborn are, they take what they want. They take whatever.
Right.
It does make sense. It's gross scene, but whatever.
Okay. And then, all right. So I can maybe agree with that, but then the next one is where it goes. So it goes directly from one sex scene, literally directly into another. Like it's not even much. It cuts into the next, and not only this sex scene, by the way, has no bearing on anything. It's just Littlefinger looking through a peephole on a wall.
Well, it's layers, right? It's Littlefinger looking at someone looking through a peephole. Littlefinger looking through a peephole, looking at a dude looking through a peephole.
What?
Yeah, there were 3 layers to that, man. The dude looking through the peephole was watching other people have sex while the girl was blowing him, and then Littlefinger was looking through a peephole at that guy, making sure his customers are happy.
Yeah. Okay.
It's messed up.
Anyway, so that happens. Roz is upset. This customer gets upset. This is the worst. The worst part is when he wipes like that girl's mouth.
Yeah,
it's not even close to the. It's like it's so clearly shitty.
This is the one whenever we talk about it. This is the one that's, I think, it's a bit over the top in terms of.
You think, Dan? You think, Dan?
I'm grasping at straws, but that in terms of applying a purpose to it, it's showing how business minded Littlefinger is. Obviously, we get that later on. I know.
We don't need it here.
It is. It's gross for the sake of being gross to a degree, I think.
Yeah, it's grotesque is basically the it's unnecessary in that.
Yeah. Whatever.
Yeah. So
it's also not the end of the world. I'm not.
No, I can, when people make the criticisms towards Game of Thrones.
Yeah, this is where it's earned. Yeah.
So yeah, fair, earned, absolutely, right here in this scene. So then Littlefinger can quote unquote comforts Roz, who's crying, who's still shaken up by seeing a baby murdered in front of her face. I think understandably, I don't know how I deal with seeing a baby murdered in front of my face. I probably not well. I'm gonna be honest, probably not well. Basically
especially because it was a baby that was living in her house, like her.
It's like she knew the baby.
You wouldn't want to go to work the next day.
Yeah. I guess is the next day.
It's probably not.
It's close enough.
Yeah.
Anyway, he comforts her by telling her that he hates bad investments and he doesn't like unhappy employees. That's essentially what he's saying.
Yeah.
It'd be a shame if you were unhappy every day, because then I'd have to recoup my losses by selling you to a crazy person, is really what he says in this scene.
Yeah. He's a pimp and she's costing him money by not working.
Yeah.
Right.
This scene solely exists to show that Littlefinger, Lord Baelish, is a shitty person, and we could have accomplished that in a lot of ways. This one seems particularly cruel,
but effective. I mean, it's you don't really get, at this point, we haven't seen that side of Littlefinger too much, right? You got to remember that we're doing a rewatch season, so it's easy to look at them through the context of season 7.
I guess I would say that this scene, I guess with Roz,
yeah,
wouldn't be as bad if there wasn't the half scene ahead of it.
Well, I mean, forget about that. What I'm saying is that if you hardly know Littlefinger at this point, to watch that scene really exemplifies his character. It's a good way to display that. Yeah,
it's a good speech. I think he does it well. His accent's consistent at least the entire time. I don't know. I have problems with those two scenes. I don't. It's poorly handled, I think, by Game of Thrones. I think they lean away from that later in the following seasons. But we go to King's Landing. Lord Tyrion and Janos Slynt are having a dinner. Tyrion questions Janos Slynt about killing babies and Ned's men. He said, like, well, like I heard a rumor and blah, blah, killing babies, yada, yada. So twofold. He's trying to suss out if Cersei or Joffrey gave the order to kill the babies. He thinks out of that, he assumes that Cersei gave the order. He actually gets the wrong impressions out of it. And he's trying to kind of bring to light Slynt's lack of honor. He's just trying to like admit it. He's trying to get him to kind of voice it so he can use that as his ammunition for the next basically 10 sentences.
But it's also, okay, as a whole, this scene is also Tyrion having arrived in the capital now. He's sort of trying to siphon power off of Cersei. So Slynt is a Lannister man. Same with Pycelle, right? We'll see that later on. So he's trying to, he doesn't trust these people who were Lannister servants because they were just all about Cersei. They won't listen to Tyrion. So he needs to replace them with his own people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes. I mean, that's right. I think it's a couple things. I think in this case, he's not a fan of killing babies. So I think that's part of it. The best part of the whole thing is when he says, when Janos Slynt's like, he tries to buy my loyalty. He's like, yeah, what an idiot. He didn't know you were already bought, which is such a fucking solid diss. Like, it's so good. Love that. And anyway, so that happens. He then sends Janos Slynt to the wall. He has another great line. He's like, I'm not questioning your honor. I'm denying its existence altogether, which is so good. Also, like, just nonstop bangers from Tyrion, basically.
And it's very satisfying because nobody likes Janos Slynt.
No one does. And you don't like him even. You like him even less somehow when he gets to the wall. And so he sends him off. He has Bronn take on the mantle. So for me, the most interesting part of this entire episode, of this scene, not the entire episode, just this scene, was when Tyrion's kind of like, okay, the hard part's over. Let's just me and you have a chat now with Bronn. And he's like, hey, so if I had asked you to kill babies, without question, would you do it? And he says, without question, no, I'd ask how much. And then you cut to Tyrion's face and he is like, not so much shocked, but more like awed and surprised, which does sound like shocked, but like, he's kind of like, I think he hoped that there was more humanity there, I think is when.
Could be.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would say that he shocked or surprised. I think like he, in the back of his head, he probably knew that about Bronn. He has always known that about Bronn. And he was maybe hoping that it weren't the case because he wants to believe that he's on the side of he's on the right side. Yeah. And that's not the case. Like
Bronn doesn't grow as a character over time, and he does grow a bit of a conscience, I think.
No.
A little bit. You don't think ever?
Not at all.
You don't think ever?
Bronn never.
Never.
The whole point of his character is that he
Bronn, who helps Tyrion enter the capital.
Yeah, because he likes the guy. It's not.
He gets a little bit of a conscience. He had no financial. He only puts himself at risk by doing that. He doesn't help himself at all.
Okay. Yeah,
right?
Yeah. I guess towards once they get past the books, he grows a bit of a conscience. I'll say that. He's not like, that's not my interpretation of his character. He's a sellsword through and through. He's with Tyrion because it's profitable. He likes him well enough.
Especially, I'm just saying at this time, absolutely. I just think that Tyrion kind of had hoped more for him, and then it is kind of he's. I think maybe disappointed is the word.
I don't think Tyrion hoped any more or less for.
Look
Bronn.
at his face. I'm telling you. Look at Tyrion's face after he says that.
No, I get it. It's not about Bronn though. It's about himself. It's about Tyrion, believing that he's above that stuff, and then it turns out he's employing the same type of people that Cersei was.
I suppose. Anyway, I just think it's a really cool because he doesn't say anything. Tyrion doesn't say anything. It just cuts to the next scene, and there's a really good cool ambiguity there that I think is really interesting. We then cut to Arya on the road, and another gorgeous opening shot of this. Like, I'm presuming it's essentially the same location. They just shot it from a different angle, and Arya and Hot Pie and some random dude are having an argument about what makes a fight a battle, which is actually like a pretty funny semantic argument. Gendry comes over and kind of clears the air a bit, but not before Arya can start to question him about why Gold Cloaks were after him. So I think this is actually when Gendry calls her out for being.
You might be right.
I
Yeah.
think this is actually when it happens. Because that's when it's in my notes. So it definitely is when it happens. Yeah. And again, we're not going to retread it, but that's actually when this happens.
That's the crux of this scene, basically.
Yeah. It's a fun little moment. It's nice. We already talked about it out of turn. We cut to Pike. Now we're actually at Pike. Theon arrives at the dock and no one is there to greet him. Like I said, we bring this up later. There's no one there to greet him. There's no big welcome party for him,
Right.
except for some old guy who thinks that wine is a woman's drink, which is a funny line. And I mean, he basically, I don't know, he just gives the guy some money, go get me a horse, yada, yada, yada. Yara arrives. So I think we should mention here, we don't talk about much, but Yara is named Yara on the show instead of her book name Asha to avoid confusion with the wildling Asha.
Yes.
Which is completely understandable because on the page, there is literally one letter difference between them, but they make the same sound.
Or Asha, you could say.
I guess.
She's Asha with an A, and Asha's Asha with an O.
It's tough.
I understand why they made that change, and that's fine. I'm not worried about that. Like, the character itself is also somewhat different than in the books, and that's what I would be more not concerned.
It's like an amalgamation of several characters.
No, it's just a different interpretation of the character. So in the book, she's much more flirtatious. I know in this scene she tries to be, and that's fine. But for the most part, her character is relatively serious in the show.
Yeah,
and she's not at all that in the book. She's much more lively and a lot of fun actually to read that character. So this interaction is very different in the books. She's kind of enticing, like she's like really teasing him, but also she doesn't let him actually grope her like that. Like
so there's this that's weird. So in this particular scene, this is before we get there because we cut back to that, or we get there in a bit. But when I was writing my notes, I paused the show. When I paused it, it was that this scene where it's so funny, where Theon, his head is basically tilted at 45-degree angle down, staring right at her boobs. It's and I kept writing my notes and I looked over there and I would just giggle. It's so obvious, and very funny. I mean, like they really leaned into let's make Theon a fucking shitty person, and they did it well. They did very well.
Yeah. And that's her whole purpose there, though, is that the reason she doesn't introduce herself, she's trying to understand who he really is.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So he's new to the island. He left when she was a child. She's trying to understand his true nature.
Okay, so we get some nice scenic shots of the countryside, which I think is shot in Ireland, I believe.
Yeah, that sounds right. Northern Ireland.
I think it's shot in Northern Ireland. While Theon literally gropes his own sister.
Yeah, so that's a bit much, right?
Yeah. So it is important, and you mentioned this earlier, it's important to mention, as unforgivable as Theon is in these moments, we need to remember why they are portraying him in this way at this time, right? It's the long game, and it's because his torture and redemption would mean a lot less,
right?
If it wasn't for these moments.
He falls, and he falls hard,
right?
And then, I don't know if he's fully redeemed at this point in season 7, but it's pretty
damn close though, right? Like you gotta, it's hard to say like, how are you fully redeemed from what he does? But like, it's like, he's done as much as a person can to redeem themselves, So you got to give him the benefit of the doubt.
So Theon at this point, he's just douchey. Later on, you actually hate him because he betrays Robb and the Starks.
And he murders 2 innocent boys. Burns them alive.
Yeah. And after all that's said and done, after he gets away from Ramsay, I've forgiven him. I guess that's
it? That's the moment when he gets away from Ramsay, you forgive him at that point because he's gone through enough at that point?
Like, listen, like in the books, like he disappears for 2 books, and then like you have chapters where it's his perspective and he's being tortured, and it's insane.
I would say that, and I'll agree, I'll just say this now, that the torture scenes in this show, I don't know if we need all of them. I just don't think we need all of them.
Well, yeah, because you don't like it because it's uncomfortable.
No, I know, and I don't. It's. I feel like it's like indulgent. Like it's playing off the hey, our show is edgy. type thing, and I don't think that
I
you
don't know.
need that much torture in one show. I don't think you do in one it's like in one season. It's all in one season, and it's a lot. And I don't think that it needs to be that much. I think obviously it needs to be there, just not.
You're just
that
saying that though
much.
because you're uncomfortable with it, right? Like,
No, I get that, but again, I just think it comes from a disingenuous place. I don't think that if you were trying to just tell the story in a straightforward way, and without trying to play try to play that edgy card, you wouldn't need to do that. I don't think that you would. I don't think if you're making a movie of Game of Thrones, there wouldn't be an hour of torture scenes.
right?
You know what I mean? So
Sure.
that's kind of how I come down.
All right. Well, we'll get to that, I guess.
Well, maybe. Okay, so we get to Pike's throne room. Is there a name for that throne room? It's just it doesn't have any special name.
The chair. Well, even it's actually not on Pike. I don't believe.
No,
The
it's
sea stone chair.
the salt. I think they call it the salt throne in the show.
Yeah.
And Balon. This is the first time we meet Balon, and I as much as the Ironborn are annoying and seem to just constantly be annoying, like nothing other than that, Balon is a very cool character, in the sense that like he is just tied intrinsically to the traits of the Ironborn. Like he just lives and breathes that every single day of his life. Right.
Yeah, he's another one of those characters, like Stannis, like Ned Stark, too rigid, too proud to bend and to compromise, right? So it's always you always like being introduced to a character who is free of compromise, just because they're filled with conviction, that they're really
Well, it's easy to read
dedicated
them,
to their cause.
right? You know exactly who they are right away.
Sure.
Anyway, so Balon greets Theon by questioning what type of man has returned after a frightened boy was taken from him. A cool line. It does beg the question of what type of man Theon would have been if he had stayed, I think. And I don't know if it's worth diving into that. But if Theon had, there's a lot of what ifs in there, like, why that would have happened or whatever. Theon would have been a lot more like Yara, I think, is really at the end of the day.
He would have been a lot more like Balon.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he makes a good point here too. He says the Starks had him longer than Balon did.
Right, which makes me question his age. At best, he's 17 years old.
He's 19, I believe, at this point.
So if Ned had I literally wrote this down. If Ned had Theon longer than Balon did, and that was 9 years, that would make him at best 17 years old.
I thought it was 10 years that he was with the Starks.
They said 9.
Oh, okay.
So even then, if it was 10, it would still be at best 18. So
19.
No, you're talking 1 year difference to what I'm talking about. You had him longer. So again, unless you included, there's a wash over a year, I guess. I just hit my own microphone. There's a wash over a year. Then it's 17 years old. 17, 18. I'm not asking you to do the math right now.
You should check your
math. I've done the math. I
don't know.
He had them from 9 years. So
yeah, no, I get that. I thought it was 10.
Right.
I didn't realize they had said 9 in the show.
All right, anyway, he doesn't look like a 17-year-old or even an 18-year-old. Like, if we're being honest.
None of them look like how old they are, but actually most of them are aged up. So it's interesting that they aged Theon down.
Well, I don't understand. Like, they're using specific numbers, which is why I think that's kind of a mistake, because
they try not to do that as much as possible. They stay away from those.
Does he not have a full beard? Like, does he not have a beard?
Theon?
Does he not have any beard at all?
He has wisps of a beard. He's never had a full beard.
Okay. He can grow about as good of a beard as I can.
Yeah, it's about that.
Okay. Anyway, so that's fine. That's kind of just neither here nor there. But Balon, so he says, Balon asks him what he thinks about Ned's death, which I think is an interesting question to ask your son who's been living with this person for a long time. Theon, all he says is what is done, which is, I think, a good diplomatic answer from Theon.
But not what Balon wanted to hear at all.
No, but like, what does Balon want to hear? He's like, well, fuck that bastard. Like, what does he want? Like, what does he want to hear there?
I think at this point, much like what Yara does earlier in this scene, Balon's trying to gauge Theon and understand who he is, where his values lie. So he's testing him with these sort of provocative.
No, I get that, but what's the answer that he's looking for? What's the answer Balon's looking for? That answer.
It's hard to say. So if Theon says something like, thank God I'm finally rid of him, blah blah blah, then maybe he thinks that it's too easy, like he's just saying what he wants to hear.
I feel like Balin's smarter than that though. Like you think that like, okay, he spent that long with this person. He's not going to just
Yeah,
assume, I feel like it's it's a leading question. He's already made up his mind about how this is going to go. Like he knows already how this is
not
going to go.
necessarily.
He has Yara set up to come in halfway through the whole conversation.
Yeah, that's fine. But I would stick with what I said earlier. He's still gauging Theon. That doesn't mean there's an answer that he wanted to hear. It just means he wants to see what Theon would say and how he would react to being provoked like that.
I disagree. I think he is looking for something specific because otherwise like, he wouldn't be as confrontational, right? Like you need if you're trying to you're just trying to get someone's answer, you don't ask leading questions like that, right? He's looking for a particular answer and he knows he's not going to get it. He's already made up his mind about how this is going to go. It's pretty clear from the very beginning of the scene that he understands exactly what's about to happen and how it's going to play out.
Sure, because so he automatically doesn't respect Theon because of how he was brought up
Yeah.
by Ned Stark, because of the silks and the gold that he's wearing, that kind of stuff. He makes a visual assessment of him.
Yeah, he asked him, did you pay the iron price or the gold price for your jewelry or whatever whatever he's talking about. It is a pretty like the way that the way it's shot is very cool, I think, and like very evocative. So he talks about his he wears a cape. I don't think he's ever worn a cape on the show ever before that or since then. But he wears a cape in the scene with this like gold like pendant that like keeps it clasps it together. And Balon talks about how like whatever blah 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 gold price, iron price. He talks about what that means and then rips it off of him, and then the wide shot is the cape falling off of him, and it's like so evocative of like just being emasculated in front of your own father.
Right.
It's so powerful, I think, and again, it's played up because again, he's never worn that kind of outfit before, but it works so well. I think I give props to the show for that one. I think it really does a good job with that. Okay, and this is where Yara walks in. This is one of those like, how did they have this timed kind of things? Because he says like, I'll lead the army, and then she walks in and says, I'll lead the army. He presents the Theon presents the offer that Robb makes about hey, join forces with me and I will make you king of the Iron Islands again.
Yeah,
right. And we talked about this last week, but that's just not how that works for people.
Very poor choice of words. Like he says, he can't be given anything. He has to take it, right? He makes that very clear in this scene. That doesn't really need explaining.
No, yeah, you're right. Yep. I mean, the iron price is things. It's not a sustainable model, though. I'll just point this out. They are a set like, and they kind of talk about this, I think, a little bit in the show, but essentially the idea that if you have to take literally everything to earn it, it's just not sustainable. Like you can't constantly do that. It only ever creates enemies. It doesn't ever help you, ever.
Yeah, but
so
I mean, the Ironborn aren't really looking to make.
No,
friends.
I get that. But like if they're essentially Vikings, right?
They're a mix of Vikings and pirates. Yeah,
right. Eventually, people lose all respect for you as a people, right? And then you have nothing but hatred from everywhere. And then again, that's not a sustainable model. You can't live in a world like so. Like again, this is still a very like pretty isolated world, but it's still like in terms of a like a medieval culture, it's pretty globalist, right? Like you consider like the continent itself of Westeros is pretty interdependent on itself.
Yeah.
Right. So for one of them to be like, no, we don't give anything, we only ever take anything, doesn't work. Right.
Yeah. That's why he rebelled. Like, it's just their culture doesn't mix with the other cultures of Westeros.
I guess I would say that like
it's not meant to be sustainable.
I get that. What I'm saying is that eventually over time that would just be worn down. Right. That's what into being a softer version of whatever that is. Right. we're still hard, but we'll still play by the rules.
Yeah, and
you
that's
know?
very much where they're at right now. Like for the duration of the Targaryen rule, that's what was happening to the Ironborn. They were at the peak of their power. They were at the apex when Harren the Black built Harrenhal, right? And then Aegon and his dragons landed. They destroyed Harrenhal. They killed Harren, and that was the end of the Ironborn rule.
yeah.
They had the Iron Islands, all the Riverlands, all the way up to Harrenhal. Like they were at their peak
Yeah.
of power. So ever since then, it's been a slow decline. But Balon still values the old ways, and that's why he's trying to bring that culture back. That's why he rebelled during Robert's reign, and that's why he's choosing to do it again,
Right.
to go back to the old ways. And
Yeah, that always works out.
well, he's a traditionalist.
um,
But the thing is, the Iron Islands don't have a lot of natural resources, so the people living there had to take stuff in order to build.
Clearly
and
they
live.
have thousands of trees.
Well, hey,
and
yeah, don't get
lots
me-
of cotton.
don't get me
or
started on that.
something. It's obvious. Just
You notice in this episode when they're talking about their fleets, like Salador Sand has 30 ships.
Yeah.
It's 2 digits, you know? Like they're talking about other people who have like, holy he's got 200 ships. Like it's like
that's a lot of
unfathomable-
ships.
Yeah.
And then how many ships? How
Then
did
Euron Greyjoy arrives and makes 1,000 ships in an episode.
It's ridiculous. I know. It's crazy.
nuts.
Anyway, so we should just quickly mention that Yara walks in. Theon was like, "What? You're Yara? What?" His mind is literally blown in that second. You get that whole sexist Ironborn thing. He's like, "You can't be a you can't be a general. You're a woman."
See, the thing is, that's not an Ironborn thing. That's just that's a Westeros.
It's a Westeros thing. And
Yeah.
You can't be a pirate. You can't be
You
a
can't
general.
rule. You're a girl.
Yeah.
And Balon has chosen her as his heir. Said at this point,
Right.
over Theon.
Anyway, Balon refuses Theon's offer / Rob's offer. And he says he'll pay the iron price and hints that he'll be attacking the North and not the Lannisters.
Well, yeah. Theon, I think the way it goes is he says you'll never be able to take on the Lannisters on your own. And
Yeah.
he said, who said anything about the Lannisters?
Right.
Which at this point, if you're watching the show and haven't read the books, you don't know what's going on.
Yeah. I was just saying that's the hint here. We know now as
now-
we're watching the show, Dan.
Looking back.
Yeah. That's clearly what he's hinting at. All right, then we go to Dragonstone. Davos is making a deal with a pirate to fight alongside Stannis when they attack the King's Landing from the sea. Salador San from Essos is somewhat of a pirate king, I guess, a little bit at this time. 30 ships, that's a lot of ships for a pirate. Who has a fleet at his back. Davos, a former smuggler, understands him and is able to convince him to join, basically.
They're like old drinking buddies, these two.
Yeah. The only caveat that Salador has is that he wants to, quote, get Cersei. He wants to have Cersei as his prize, right? Yeah, so there's I feel like a whole 2 minutes of dialogue about how he about how he wants that to be his prize. And then some annoying kid speaks up and starts saying something about all I can think about is who's this guy, basically. I'm like, who the fuck is this guy who's talking right now? And then I realize it dawns on me, it's his son, who he never talks about again after season 2.
It's Davos' son. He introduced him in that same scene, I believe. Like they were talking and he references that is his son. You have to kind of pay it is subtext.
Yeah.
Yeah, his son Mathos. That character is an amalgamation of, because in the books Davos has 6 sons. And so this character Mathos,
they
is
really
representing-
rubbed them the wrong way. That's that sucked. You had 6 sons, but in the show you only have 1, and he's gonna die. He's just gonna die in the same do all 6 of his sons die in the battle?
Most of them do.
Right, but not all of them.
Well, there's a couple that are too young that are with his wife still.
Right.
And I think the rest probably do die in the Blackwater.
Not only, I'm just annoyed by this whole thing because his son is probably one of the most underdeveloped characters on the entire show ever.
Fair enough.
Right.
Yeah.
And he makes a big deal about having a son and all that stuff. And then he never fucking talks about his son ever again on the entire maybe references him here or there once in a while. I'm having a hard time thinking of what those are, but he basically after that season 2 finale is ignored as a key part of the character. His son died, and it doesn't affect him at all.
I'm sure they address it right away in season 3. I'm sure whenever he meets Stannis and Melisandre, he will say that battle was a disaster. I lost my son.
I mean,
that
we've
kind of
seen
stuff.
We've seen that episode. Do we know? Do we know that?
Well, I don't.
That
I don't
happens?
remember. That doesn't mean it didn't happen. It doesn't stick out to me. It's
Yeah.
not a significant part of the episode, but I'm sure they address it and then they do move on. Because why would he be telling Jon about his son, really? And why would that be on screen?
No, I understand that, but at the same time, that's kind of a character defining moment when your only son is murdered, and especially it's in a battle that was brought on by your boss. Essentially, he has no ill will against Stannis for basically killing his kid.
No, he's 100% loyal to Stannis even after the Blackwater, both
Yeah.
in the books and in the show.
Which is questionable, I would say, as a character trait. I just would be anyway. It's fine. I don't want to lay on that too long. So I guess really all you need to take away from this is that Davos's son is like a true believer in the whole
The Lord of Light.
Lord of Light thing, role lore, and that's essentially it. That's really the only takeaway you need to get from him.
And that he's constantly trying to convert Davos, who won't have any of it.
Well, there's a couple of things you get. So you get that he's trying to convert him, and that also we learn that Davos can't read. That's the first time we kind of get that information, which is an important character arc for him, which I think is important. Like it does work, right? Like him going from not being able to read to being able to not only read and write. Like that's a pretty long form arc. So that starts right at this episode. So I think that's interesting. I like this scene, not because of his son, but purely because of the pure joy of seeing Davos like in his element, basically talking with someone who's like sees the world in like basically the same way he does. Like when he mentions that pirates don't grow old, like that's like only something that like two sea guys could say, right?
Two seamen, yeah.
I said sea guys, Daniel.
No, you're right.
You're talking. Are you referencing the Sega Saturn game Seaman? Is that what you're talking about?
No, because you're the only one in the world that knows about that game.
It's actually a Dreamcast game. It's a Sega Dreamcast game. It's a sea.
Okay.
Anyways, really dumb. It's about a fish that has a head of like a human face for a head, and you like grow them in this tank. Do you remember hearing about that?
No, no one in the world has heard of this.
No, it's the thing.
This sounds like a dream you had.
No. It's called Seaman.
No,
I swear to God.
Anyway,
you're
right though, because Davos, you basically only ever see him talking to in his mind his betters, right? So he has this view of the noble class as a strata above him, and the way that they talk, the way that they view the world is just something that he can't relate to. But it's something that he doesn't necessarily aspire to, but he wants his grandsons to.
Well, he's not. It's not even that. I think he's just grateful that that because he's attached to it, it gives his children a leg up that other kids didn't have. Right? He's like, I will deal with whatever I got to deal with Stannis' crazy bullshit, but it gives you the chance to do something with your life.
Yeah.
That I didn't
his kids.
have.
Yeah,
right.
And he also it's really. What I like about his character, one of the things I like about his character is that he has a very strong imposter's complex. So he always feels like he's not qualified to be doing the job that he's doing,
which is a very common
it's a real thing
in real world. Yeah, that's the thing. So I actually, so again, I really do enjoy that scene, regardless of the fact that I think his son is insufferable.
Most of the sons in the show are.
That's fair, but this one's particularly bad. And we only ever get him for one season, and then he dies, and then is never talked about again. Which is why I completely forgot he existed.
That's fair. I can see that.
We go to King's Landing, Tyrion and Cersei. Cersei, they're in their, like, I think someone's chambers, either Cersei's or Tyrion's. Cersei is upset at Tyrion for banishing Janos Slynt to the wall, understandably. After all, he was in her pocket. There's this really cool moment where they're basically throwing titles around at each other. Like, I did this because I'm the hand of the king. Like, you can't do this. And I'm the queen regent. And it's so funny that they're doing that because it's all blah, blah, blah bullshit because they're just brother and sister. And they're just like trying to like leverage this or that to try to win an argument. And I think it's one of the most like pure, honest conversations that the two of them ever have on the show. It just feels, there's a moment, especially later on, that, when she says like, you were funny or whatever. And she obviously has a grudge against Tyrion, but like, it's so honest. Like the way she says it is just so. She's like, yeah, she can understand that he is legitimately funny. She gets that, but for her, it doesn't matter anything. No matter what positive qualities he has, it's all about the fact that he killed her. He killed her mom, and at that moment, Tyrion says, you know, she was my mom too, but she just can't see that. She's just too angry, blinded by rage, by the whole thing, to even be willing to accept that as an argument.
Yeah, because it's something that happened to her. It didn't happen to Tyrion. That's how she views it, right? Tyrion, as far as she is concerned, killed their mom. Tyrion feels guilty about that, as well as the pain of not growing up with his mom, whatever. But Cersei feels it in a different way, so she'll never not resent Tyrion.
So earlier on in the scene, I'll just kind of bounce back a bit. So Tyrion brings up that Cersei is losing the people, you know, the general people, the gen pop, as you will. She promptly replies that she doesn't care, which is something that has kind of been a through line for her as a character for the entire show. She does not give a shit about the regular people. She just doesn't give a fuck.
Right. They're means to an end.
Yeah. You know, Tyrion confronts her about like the whole baby slaughtering thing, and you know, at that moment, he understands that it wasn't her who gave the order, that it was actually Joffrey.
Yeah,
and there's kind of like a touching moment there, a little bit.
Well, yeah, she sort of hesitates, and this is one of those moments where you realize that Joff is out of her control. You know, he's just a negligent.
This kind of, I think, this clues Tyrion into like, oh shit, I need to put more like controls on this guy. Like, I need to lock this down even more than I thought I already did.
He does, and he does it. He has to be very subtle about it as well.
Yeah. You know, Cersei gets really upset. You know, she's only understood the rule, like that for her, she's only ever understood that ruling is complicated. Here's Tyrion coming in. He's got all these great ideas, but like, this is just new to him. Like, what the fuck does he know? For her, this has all been complicated and hard and difficult and painful for her entire life. Right. And she makes this moment where she has this thing where she's like, this has always been like, easy for you. And, you know, like a joke for you and Jaime. And she has this grudge against the two of them for essentially just being who they are. And it's not because they don't feel the same weight of those decisions that she's making. Like she feels the weight of the decisions that she has to make, and it shows in her personality and how she reacts to the world. That life is hard, and that as someone who has to make decisions, those decisions are hard and hard on me. But Jaime and Tyrion, they don't show that. They internalize it, but they don't show it. And she's upset. She's mad at them. And like this, for whatever reason, really like, you know, came to like, just really showed itself to me. And I was like, she's just mad. No, she's not mad at them because they don't feel those same things that she does. She's mad because they don't show the same thing. They don't experience it in the same way that she does. She's just mad at them for being them because they're able to internalize it and she's not able to.
Maybe like, yes, that's true. It is also her like, you know, selfish point of view that she's seeing the world through her own eyes and doesn't necessarily understand what they're going through. Because I don't know if she fully understands that they do internalize it. I think she thinks that they're more aloof.
Yeah, it's all a joke to them. She thinks it's all a joke. She's like, well, we don't take this seriously, but they do. But they just don't. They don't. The thing is, they don't experience it the same.
That's something that applies to every man in her life aside from Tywin, right? So Robert was the same way, and one of her major motivators is that all these men in her life, the people that are supposed to be in charge, are in her mind inept and goofy and don't take it seriously. And if she just was born with the right parts, again, in her mind, she would be better than all of them. That's what she.
Yeah, I think that's a fool's errand. I guess a fool's argument because at the end of the day, if she'd grown up as a boy in the Lannister household, she probably would have grown up a lot more like Jaime would have.
Exactly.
Right. Who doesn't take things as seriously, but he does though. He does take things seriously. We know that he does because he makes clutch decisions at you know, maybe impromptu times, you know, but he plays off his internal struggles with those things as humor and jokes. Like this is a thing that people do in real life all the time.
Yeah, it's called deflecting.
Yeah. And both Tyrion and Jaime are really good at it, and she's never been good at it.
Deflecting is not necessarily something that should be.
No, I know, but that's why she's so upset. She's like, you don't take this seriously. They do. They do take it seriously.
No, but she doesn't know that. That's what she's.
I know, but she doesn't, and that's what I'm saying. She doesn't understand that, so she's mad at them at the end of the day.
I know.
For just being them.
Well,
right? For being able to deflect and do that, they come off that way, but it's because they're able to do that, and she's not able to do that.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. I think we're saying the same thing here.
I agree. I thought that was very powerful. Like in that particular scene, I was like, wow, that's very cool. Because she just can't see the world the same way that they do. She's incapable of it. All right. So moving on, Dragonstone. And Davos is telling Stannis that he's gotten 30 ships from the pirate. We already know that he's gotten the deal. Makes some smart commentary about he can trust him to keep his word for the gold, right? It's one of those things where like we can trust him because we promised him gold, right? One of those whole deals. Stannis thinks that, he seems to think that's fair. Yeah, well, he'll get his share when he performs up to the standard, right? And then Davos and his son are kind of sent away. It's kind of weird how it's done because he's like,
it's okay. Real weird.
Yeah, it's like, all right, you can go now. And he kind of gives him a funny look, and then he looks at his son. And he's like, well, it's strange. So he sends them out, and and then leaving Stannis and Melisandre together. But before they go, Melisandre whispers something into Davos's son's ear. Stannis asks what she said to him, and he says that. I don't know what's the exact line?
She says, "Death by fire is the purest form of death,"
which is how he dies, right?
Yeah.
So he just basically tells him how he dies. It's pretty. Why would she do that?
It is cryptic. I guess the idea is, he is, like you said earlier, a true believer of the Lord of Light. So she's in a way comforting him, even though he doesn't know he's going to die that way. Like she's saying that, you have been a true servant to the Lord of Light, and you'll be rewarded in the afterlife, essentially. Right.
Yeah. All right, fair enough. And then one of my favorite moments from this entire episode happens when Melisandre says to Stannis, "You look troubled," and he says, "Yeah," and like it's just yeah, and it's like a 3-second. It's not even it's like half a second cut. Yeah, like I'm fucking troubled.
Yeah.
You fucking idiot.
What are you, new?
Yeah, like I'm sorry. I'm only trying to lead an army against my own brother and also the enemy, but no big deal. Yeah, I'm fucking troubled. I thought it's so curt and short, and so I honestly laughed out loud.
Yeah.
In the way it's cut. It's so good. Anyway, Stannis asks for the help. He's like, well, hey, your Lord of Light's so helpful. Like, fucking ask for help then. And she basically gives him the classic theological kind of answer, which is, I don't ask for help. I listen. I don't ask. I listen, which is fair. I'll allow that.
Okay.
No, it's fair only because that's the whole like one God, religion in this world is analogous to like mono theological cultures that we have now, right? So there's a lot of parallels there, and one of those is that you don't ask God for things that God tells you things, and that it's a pretty common answer, and I think it kind of it makes sense in regards to how it relates to like our modern like monoculture, they're monotheological. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So that makes sense to me. And then we get this quick line about that Renly has 100,000 men, which is a fucking lot of people. And Stannis thinks that those are all people that should be following him, which is really important note of how Stannis sees things.
Because a good chunk of them are bannermen to Storm's End.
Right.
They're the Storm Lords, right? They're bannermen to House Baratheon, and he, even if he weren't the rightful king, which he is in his mind,
right,
but he would still be, the leader of House Baratheon, the patriarch of House Baratheon, and so the army should be sworn to him, but they're choosing Renly over him.
So I think this is one of the most interesting scenes in the entire episode for me. I think purely because I think Stannis is one of the most interesting characters in the entire show, and one of his character traits is Stannis's constant struggle between like faith and pragmatism, and he is literally constantly battling with himself to try to believe in one or the other and both at the same time, and it doesn't ever work for him. He can't fully believe, like have full faith in the Lord of Light. It doesn't work. He he can't separate his mind from the practical elements of warfare. And in this scene, it's really well spelled out. He's basically saying like, it's great that you know having faith, but in reality, people who have less men 90% of the time lose the war, right? And she's like, well, in the case, well, it'll have to be the 10%, is what she says, and he can't wrap his head around that. Like he tries to. He's like, I've said the words, I've done everything I can. I don't know what else to do, right? I honestly, I think Stannis is arguably one of my favorite characters in the entire show. I think it's
interesting.
He's so complex as a character that I there's very few other characters on the show that are able to get to that level. And there could be other things into it. I'm sure there is, but at this point, like this scene, knowing what I know of Stannis throughout the entire series is very interesting to me.
Absolutely,
I really like it.
It's a fair point.
Anything else? Anything else you want to say about the scene?
I guess ostensibly this is the first time that they have been together sexually.
Yeah, there's that whole part where she drops her robe.
Yeah, so this
I didn't say that yet.
Something this is the beginning of him essentially dealing with the black magic and creating those smoke babies and blah blah blah.
Yeah, the one smoke baby. She says that she promises to give him a son,
and that you'll notice though that kind of influences his decision. You know, so there is a bit of ego there as well, which is not something that you would normally associate with Stannis.
So there's a couple of things that's happening here. So she is playing off a couple things that she knows about Stannis that we didn't know until this sign. So there's the scene is doing a couple of things. It's giving you information about Stannis and his life. It's giving you information about how manipulative that Melisandre can be. So we didn't know about the situation about all the stillborns with Stannis.
Right.
We didn't know that until now. Right. She's had a bunch of babies, but none of them were. Well, we don't also. She doesn't mention his daughter, so that's interesting, right? And then she promises to give him a son. So these are like playing on his emotions and also giving us new information at the same time, right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of basic. That's basically this entire scene. I think it's one of the best scenes in this entire episode. I think, in my mind, in terms of favorite scenes. Spoilers. This is my favorite scene.
You always do that.
Yeah,
you always just say it.
Yeah, well, because we're basically at the end. There's only one more scene. Craster's keep beyond the wall. Set the scene. There's no dialogue in this, so I'm just gonna set the scene. Jon sees someone with a baby walking into the woods. It's nighttime, dark.
Mm-hmm.
There's no clouds in the sky. It's the stars are out. Right.
Okay.
There is you hear owls, small critters, running around.
Do it a bit slower. Slow it down.
He decides to follow them. Right. Someone with a baby follows them. We hear bird noises, then scraping and rustling. And I only say that because when I had the subtitles on, these are the descriptors that they used: scraping, rustling, baby crying.
Mm-hmm.
Jon runs after it and draws his sword. He sees something pick up the baby in the distance. Turns around, gets knocked out.
Yeah. So dumb.
Gets knocked out by Craster. Credits. That's the scene.
I hate it.
Is there a hint of a blue eye or blue anything in this? It was hard for me to tell. I didn't see anything.
I don't know whether or not there is, but it's not necessary. It's pretty obvious who he's sacrificing the babies to.
Is it then at this point in the series, in season 2, when we've talked about
at this point,
no,
it's hard for me to separate.
It's absolutely not.
Yeah,
it's absolutely not. It's as a person who was a TV watch, as a person who is and has always been a person who's only ever watched the show.
Right.
This is setting up some mystery that you're like, what the fuck is this? What the fuck is this?
All right.
And I don't think the show does a good enough job laying the groundwork to give you the information you need to connect that to the White Walkers. Because first of all, they've mentioned maybe twice in the entire show. This is the second season.
Yeah.
They've been talked about once, and this is not. We don't know. There is no prior information to assume that they would take babies. This is not something we assume is already happening. So you think, okay, the boys are taken away by some other other wildling group to be raised into soldiers. Like there's a lot of other things it could be.
I guess.
And without prior book knowledge, I don't think there's enough information provided by the show to assume that there's some sort of
Yeah, and that's fine. This is still
Yeah.
season 2. It's not meant to
no. I
connect
get
all the
I get
dots.
that. I'm just saying that at this point, it's a very cool mystery, like what's happening, and I'm all for that. I just don't think it's fair to say, hey, isn't it cool how they tease the White Walkers at this point? I mean, because they're not really.
No, whatever. I guess I can't have that perspective. Obviously, I've read the books too many times before this had happened, so it's obvious to me. Interesting that you have that perspective. Either way, though, what I like about the White Walkers is that they are so subtle about it for the first couple seasons, even in the first couple of books. Like they're very low key, here and there, hinted at. It's a large mystery that's
Is the end of the season have the Sam hiding behind the rock?
I think that's the end of season 2, where that's the Fist of the First Men.
Yeah, which is how does he survive that?
I know. I always hated that. It doesn't make any goddamn sense.
He's just hiding behind a
He
rock.
just looks at a White Walker, and then in the next episode, a season later, he's walking through the snow. I guess you're supposed to think that he just walked away, and the White Walker either didn't think he was worth it or lost him in the snow. I don't know. It's too much, man.
So wait. So does the Walker look him in the eye? Like it looks.
It looks
him in
at
the
him
face?
and goes like,
Maybe just coincidence. He didn't see him, right?
I don't know.
He's just
I don't
there.
know. It's not important. We'll talk about that in episode 10 of this season.
Yeah, right.
I don't think my opinion is going to change. But
okay, your favorite scene. I already talked about mine. Mine is that
Okay.
Stannis scene. I thought it's so full of
That's-
context.
yeah,
I love
no,
it. Subtext.
that, especially because at this point we don't really know Stannis too well, so that was a great way to introduce the character, get a little bit of a deeper dive into him.
You're gonna say let me
favorite-
guess, Danny's scene.
What?
Danny, yeah.
You know me. I'm a sucker for that desert. No, it's got to be Tyrion and Varys. It's got to be.
That's a good,
Every
that's a
time.
good pick. That's a good pick.
It was close between that and Littlefinger Ross as well. Forget about the beginning of that scene because you have whatever, but like that scene itself is very. I actually almost might want to change it. Like that might be my favorite scene because of how it demonstrates Littlefinger's character so effectively.
All right, fine. I won't allow it, but okay. And that does it. I mean, final thoughts in terms of the episode as a whole. I think it has a lot of great character work. Like you said, I think this episode just as a whole is full of a lot of great character work. It doesn't go everywhere. Right? I mean, we spent a lot of time in King's Landing and Dragonstone, and lacks a lot of any real momentum in terms of storytelling.
Right.
But I think purely for characterization's sakes, I think it's like a solid win. I think
It's a foundational episode, like you needed to build to create something bigger. Obviously there are those big episode 9 moments that come later on. You need episodes like this to make that worthwhile.
I mean, this episode, I think I appreciate its focus because it doesn't want to jump around. It's really about a lot of political intrigue, both on the Dragonstone side and the King's Landing side. I mean, we basically touch on Dany and Jon,
Just
but very
briefly.
little. But other than that, it's like, hey, think about this, how these two political, like, I don't know, the capitals are kind of are dealing with their own shit. I think that's interesting. I think that's cool.
And I remember when, watching it the first time, like if an episode like this is very light on Dany and Jon, the next episode is probably gonna have a bit more.
Yeah.
Just like episode 1 had Arya was only at the end, and then this one picked up right where that left off, right? And it's like that in the books as well. You'd be like, oh god, another Sansa chapter, then a Catelyn chapter. Okay, there's got to be a Jon chapter coming up. It's a good
They don't
balance.
spend a lot of time with Kat, which is nice.
I like some of her chapters. Some of them are pretty good, but not all of them are great.
So with that being said, next week's episode is What Is Dead May Never Die, episode 3, season 2. In the meantime, please go to our website, towerofbabble.ca. Go over to towerbabble.ca/donate if you want to leave us anything, or get to the Patreon page, patreon.com/towerbabblecast. Same thing on Twitter, same thing on Facebook. Those are the best ways to get a hold of us. And send us any questions, comments, concerns, anything you might have to towerbabblepodcast@gmail.com. And we'll try to answer your questions on air as best we can. I mean, again, we're in the rewatch thing. There's not a lot of questions, but comments are always appreciated.
Yeah,
So,
either way, I answer every email. They won't always be part of the show, but you'll get an answer.
yeah, we did get
I like talking about it.
We got a couple of tweets. We got a couple of emails. We didn't bring them up. They really feel apropos to what we were talking about today, so we kind of left them off the board. But they're always answered. So
And appreciate it.
yeah, and appreciate absolutely. So We'll be back next week with season 2, episode 3. And we'll talk to you then.
See you.
This week's Game of Thrones theme is a violin cover by a violin duo. You can find their work on YouTube, and they're called Anna Gold.